life, whatever that may be. And in closing, I hope that this decision to withdraw from the Democratic primary for state Senate will not be interpreted as anything other than a testimony to my wisdom, for it is wise to make this announcement at the beginning of the summer here on Cape Cod.
I think Mr. Mantle deserves a round of
Thank you. I leave my.
Totally unexpected.
Yeah. Well, see, I also love live surprises, and I leave the two candidates, and I wish you the best of luck, both of you.
I hope you're going to stay and ask a few questions.
No. This is your debate. Your debate.
Okay, well, thank you.
And thank you for your service and
Thank you.
all the good that you have done for the
Okay,
Cape
well,
Islands.
we have a little more room here.
That was a bit of a surprise to all of us. It was not fun. Okay, with that, we now will go forward with our two candidates vying for the position. And the first question, and Julian will answer this first, is what do you consider to be your top 3 challenges if you are to be elected, were to be elected?
First of all, I think another round of applause for Brian to his service. I think anyone who endeavors into this work or even puts their toe in. I remember when I was first contemplating this, in a very terrified way, and I talked to actually Senator Wolf was the person who said, hardest thing he's ever done in his life. Governor Patrick, who I asked some advice from, said the same thing, and he also gave me the advice to. His advice was, don't be afraid to lose. Don't be afraid of losing. And I think Sheila and I are both really fortunate to have learned and worked with really great, tremendous people. And I think I'm just, I really want to honor Brian's service and his commitment to the region. And Brian really exemplifies someone who has taken his experiences and has come home to the Cape. And I think we need plenty more Brian Mantles for our future. Challenges, this is a really heavy question. Really, I think that the largest challenge we're facing in my perspective is affordability. We have become profoundly unaffordable as a region. And this has been happening for a long time. So this was something that I remember when people were talking about affordability when I was in middle school. And I know I'm not the oldest candidate in the race, but I was in middle school a long time ago. Like this isn't yesterday. We were talking about affordability. We were talking about what was happening to our communities, that people were leaving, and despite some well-intentioned progress, we really haven't been able to stem that tide. And I think that is the first and foremost issue here for the region. Certainly addressing the opioid epidemic is something that I think we all care really strongly about, and protecting our fragile environment, both the environment, our natural environment, and the other threats that exist in our region, Pilgrim and so forth. But when I really look at the underpinnings of our, when I look at the structure or I look at our community, I really say that affordability has become such a challenge. That so many friends of mine who are, if they're making a life on Cape Cod, they're only here because they're able to live at home with their family, or to, that they're able to be here because they're an older person who's living with a child, or a grown child. And I think, this is the profound issue that we're facing, and the issue that I'm really thrilled to be having this conversation about with all of you and with Sheila. So thank you.
My 3 challenges?
Yes.
Okay, so I don't really look at them as challenges. I really look at them as great opportunities. I have, as I say, I have served Barnstable County for 8 years, been twice elected with your help and your faith in me, and I have never let go of that faith. I've kept it close to me and tried to serve you in the best interest that I thought possible for this region and for the people who live here. So, we've worked on wastewater issues, we have a homeless issue, we have an opiate issue, and we do have a income inequality issue. And I was thinking about that on the way here, about how more and more things are being built. Everything is luxury, and everything is for the higher brackets of income, leaving really very little for the rest of us. It's happening now again in East Boston, that's being gentrified. So my challenge will be, and great opportunity, I believe I have come to learn that progress in public life is slow. To advance, you can't just go up there and say, I've got great ideas and great answers to these problems. You have to convince people, you have to build those relationships and build coalitions. And my experience on the county commission has given me that. We worked on the wastewater. That was my passion when I first ran. We tried and failed to work with different towns individually, and things would just fall apart at town meeting. And we just realized we had to go about it at a different way. And building coalitions across the Cape and looking at this as a two-year effort, that we were going to have to really let everybody get their opinion in, and what they found wrong with ideas and what they agreed with, and bringing those coalitions together actually did build consensus, and now we are into the next phase. So I feel that we have made progress on that, and I applied that model to our homeless situation and addiction. So I believe that I have the skills and I have the experience to do a good job, and I don't look at them as challenges other than getting there on time, driving up from Wellfleet. But other than that, I feel pretty prepared for the job, and I'm excited to do it on your behalf.
You are first.
Thank you.
With this. The 2017 state budget does not have any significant funding for our wastewater crisis here on the Cape. Are there other funding options? And if so, how will you, as state senator, pursue getting them?
Yes, there are other, back in the, up until 1994, I believe it was in the 94 was the last, actually it was 74 was the last wastewater treatment that was fully funded by federal government, like 95% of it. That ended in the Reagan administration, and not much has been done since, and that really shows here on Cape Cod. So there is federal funding. We know this from the MWRA experience. And what I do believe is that when we speak with one voice, and that was the effort of getting everyone together on the wastewater issue, town by town, you're not going to have a very loud voice on Capitol Hill by saying, here, we in Truro or we in Wellfleet have this problem, we need $100 million. But as Cape Cod, people know where that is, and they know the value of Cape Cod, and no one wants to think of this place as not being pristine, and that is where we are. So to have that impact, and we have been able to get our first federal money from the federal government onto this wastewater issue. So once you get the feds in, you can keep on going, and it really is up to all of us to stick together and build that consensus and say, yes, we are in agreement here, and we need your help. And I believe that I can articulate what the efforts have been here on the Cape and what we have gone through to achieve that consensus and to what our needs are, so that I can explain that very well to my colleagues in the State House, and actually go to Capitol Hill and make that argument on behalf of us. A lot of people have put a lot of work into this, and we deserve to be heard, and we need to have that assistance. It cannot fall on the backs of the taxpayers who live and work here and are struggling to make ends meet. There is too much of a burden on everyone here, and these things cannot be falling on us.
Thank you.
So,
Julian?
Thank you. Funding for not only wastewater, but broadly environmental funding in the state budget has been not only flat, but has been decreasing. We have a self-inflicted problem in the state where we are funding our core state agencies like the Department of Environmental Protection, like the Department of Public Health where I worked, a lot of the agencies within the Energy and Environmental Affairs Secretariat at maintenance levels, or actually lower levels than they were many years ago. One of the most important things that we're going to need now, the governor's proposed to that Massachusetts assume authority that EPA has kept around approval of certain permits. If this authority does come to Massachusetts, the Department of Environmental Protection in the state will be responsible for this, which is good news, I think, for our towns, perhaps, more direct service there. However, this is an agency that has lost hundreds of positions in recent years, and there's no way that this agency is going to be able to respond to those needs to service our towns without that funding. I've worked in the state budget now actually for 6 budget cycles. The budget process is a fascinating, if not opaque one, and I've had success in getting resources for problems like wastewater, such as funding for environmental health and core public health programs. I was very successful in FY14 to convince the legislature to expand funding by over $1.6 million to those programs at the Department of Public Health. I was successful in advocating when I was still in the Baker administration for a 27% increase in the governor's proposed budget for environmental health programs as well. Have really understand how that process works. I think one of actually the most important things that we're going to need to do on Beacon Hill as the budget is getting funding for low interest or no interest loans for wastewater. And so that's really the focus there. But I think if we can't get any of that, the other piece is if the state's not going to give us resources, give our communities the flexibility to generate our own resources, but not just through a flat property tax. A lot of us here are land rich and cash poor, and I'm over my time.
Okay, thank you. Julian, we'll start with you this time. What specifically would you do to significantly reduce or eliminate homelessness on the Cape?
This is a great question. And I am someone who has a public health background, but have not worked in detail in homelessness. What I would say, though, is that we need to look at from a state funding level. There's a lot of bifurcation in our funding. So the way that the agencies here on the Cape and Islands are funded by the state, receive resources, are done in a bifurcated manner. I think that we need to get state agencies to change contracting so that there is some coordination. If you look at resources within southeastern Massachusetts, the resources are really limited here. I think first and foremost, as state senator, I would engage in a real conversation around looking at homelessness as an issue that is in and of us. I think that folks in the Cape still seem surprised that homelessness is a problem here, that homeless people, that drug addiction, that mental health somehow upset kind of our vision of ourselves. And really, many of the homeless people who are here are actually Cape Codders and are actually people in our community who are struggling. So I think first, leadership there. Second, I'd really like to do a point-in-time count, not in February, not in November when it's the winter, but do a point-in-time count in the summer when we can actually get some hard numbers around who is homeless, why are they homeless, what are their co-occurring conditions, mental health, substance abuse, et cetera. And that count needs to go beyond just walking the streets. We need to go into camps that are housing, that people are living in as well. And I think thirdly is really looking elsewhere for innovative ideas that are really going to address homelessness. We've actually seen cities where there is success in addressing homelessness is actually when you take a much more proactive approach, not denying there's a problem, not cleaning out camps, but actually providing a continuum of service for homeless people. And so that's what I'd work to do.
Sheila?
Having worked on this issue for quite a while, I think that the legislature is probably tired of hearing, if they have heard, that we keep saying that prevention is really the key. So you do have all of these different sources that come down, and there's all these regulations that if you don't hit this threshold, then you can't be helped, and there's different conditions for homeless that have children, and families and children, then there's individuals and couples. So there is there's too much of a bureaucracy around it, and I've always felt that if they could just build in flexibility into the legislation that does allow communities to use some of the resources that we receive to apply them where we see that need. So for instance, we have housing vouchers that come to the Cape through federal and state, and we don't have housing. So we have money to pay for housing, but there is no housing. Whereas if we could use that money to do prevention services before the person is actually, or the family is now finds themselves homeless, they had to actually lose their home to get those services. So this is where these regulations, and having experienced this on the ground and worked on these policies with human service agencies across the Cape for 8 years, I have chaired the Regional Network on Homelessness, which is a coalition and a collaboration of all of the service agencies across the Cape. We've gone around this many, many times. Prevention is the key, and case management is the key to keep people from re-entering homelessness. You just don't give somebody a home and say everything is great and walk away. These people are feeling very bad about themselves. They have self-stigma, and they need help to get further along and on their feet.
Thank you. This question goes first to Sheila. What is your position on charter schools, given that there will be a ballot question on it?
There will be a ballot question, and quite frankly, I am not in favor of charter schools. I look at charter schools, originally they were sort of proposed as these pilot programs that were going to be put in place, and from that we would get the best practices that we could then apply to our public school system. And I don't see any of that happening. All there is happening is taking more money from our public school system. So the charter schools here in Massachusetts, there has been legislation put around them to keep them from being profitable. But they do have the ability to hire out and contract educational management organizations, which are for profit. So there is a way, there is an opening, there's a loophole that someone is making profit out of our public dollars. Charter schools are also not responsible for providing meals to the low-income students, providing transportation, and providing special education for students. Those students somehow just don't make the mark, and if they are admitted into a charter school, there's a very good way or system, the unspoken way of getting them out and into a public school system. So this is just, to me, a way of dismantling our public school system, which is part of America. Public school systems were started in Boston. They were started by our forefathers in believing that the people needed to be educated to be able to handle the government they've been given. And this is just a way of privatizing our public school system. It is a way of bashing teachers and teachers' unions as the problem. And it is not the problem. It is us not being able to wrap our arms. There have been people who have gone to public school systems and we have put men on the moon. And I don't believe that we could do this today. We are not concentrating on the curriculum.
Thank you. Julian, same question for you.
Thank you. So to be clear, this is about a cap on charter schools. It's not germane actually to the Cape and Islands. There's 5 municipalities who've reached their cap of charter schools under the existing law. And so this is not germane to the Cape, it's not germane to Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket. I really think this ballot initiative is a huge distraction, and it's a really unfortunate one. We are talking about, we're going to be spending millions of dollars on a big fight that vilifies teachers and that critiques charter schools. And I think that, really, it's not really where the conversation needs to be. I don't support the ballot initiative. I would have supported something akin to the compromise that came out of the Senate. Senator Wolf worked really hard on that, and it was something that everyone seemed not very happy with it, which I think usually means it's a sign of good legislation, right? The job there is to compromise and to figure out a path forward. And so I'm just really disappointed that we're going to end up having this whole conversation about a very small segment of our schools. I think there are some innovative collaborations that have been happening in some Massachusetts cities. This has been happening in Springfield, a few other places, where charters are more integrated and working within the school districts, working within the teachers' unions. But the spirit of ed reform in '93 was that charters were supposed to be spaces of innovation that we would apply back and improve our public system. And that has just not been happening. And we need to work towards that. And I just think this is, public education is a really big problem, and we're focusing on only one really small solution in the Commonwealth, and I'm really disappointed in that.
Thank you. Let's see, Julian, you're first this time. How do you feel about a tax rate on taxpayers earning more than $1 million per year in order to raise money for education and transportation?
I support the Fair Share Amendment. I think this makes perfect sense. We have a self-inflicted revenue problem in the Commonwealth. So I think we're still hung over from being Taxachusetts in the 1970s, when we did have some of the highest tax rates in the country. Now Massachusetts is about, I think, 23rd, 24th in taxation in the country. We have a booming economy, especially in the greater Boston area, specifically in certain industries. Clearly that's not come down to the Cape here. The Fair Share Amendment makes good sense, and we need this. Our infrastructure is crumbling. Here in Cape Cod, I don't know if we always think of this, but we're so dependent on infrastructure. I mean, we can't get home without crossing a bridge that was built in the 30s. Our schools are so hungry for resources, and that asking those of us who have so much to pay a little more just makes good sense. And this is something I very strongly support. I really admire what the Raise Up Coalition has done to advance this, and I'm looking forward to working on this. I think this is this would really provide necessary resources that we desperately need. And this no new taxes, no new fees mantra that some in our politics and in the legislature have clung on to, I think is just really disingenuous to people. And I think that a lot of the work that state government does really is critical to health, to safety. I've done that work. I have an appreciation for that work. And so I support the Fair Share Amendment.
Sheila?
Yes, I also support the Fair Share Amendment, also known as the millionaire tax. And that is for taxing 4% more on people who make an annual income, not their assets, but their annual income of $1 million or more. And I would even go further if you're making, that should gradually increase if you're making $2, $3, or $5 million, which is not unheard of today in today's world. That was, there used to be a few millionaires. Now there's a lot of billionaires, and there's a lot of poor, and then there's the rest of us. So we have been convinced, the conversation over the last 30 years is that taxes are bad, government is your problem, and we bought that. And when I was growing up, I mean, there were two things you could count on: taxes and death. And taxes was part of the game. It was part of our common pool that we all contributed to get things done, to have an infrastructure, to have roads that allowed us to get to our jobs, into our schools, to have a transportation system that allowed us to get to our schools, to fund our education system, to fund innovation in science. This has been lacking, and we have accepted this and become, there's a lot that we can't do, and there's a lot that we need to be afraid of. And we need to have an adult conversation about taxes and about how they are important, how we each have to pay for it, but we each have to pay for it within the right way. There should not be legislation changes that make it easy for the rich to keep what they make and less easy for people who are out there struggling to be taxed more. So there has to be a shift in our legislation. We have to have the political will to write that legislation and to stand up for working class families. So I support the millionaire tax.
Thank you. All right, Sheila, we'll start with you on this one. Senator Wolf has been instrumental in crafting and supporting legislation to ensure a safe shutdown of Pilgrim and to prevent the cost of the shutdown and the post-shutdown from falling on the shoulders of taxpayers. If elected, will you commit to continuing this important work?
I commit to continuing this important work. I would have been more outspoken about this issue, only I thought Dan Wolf was doing a great job on it, and I wasn't gonna try to outdo him. I mean, he spoke to it very eloquently. As a county commissioner, I did push our board. There was a reluctance to make a stand on this, to join the 15 towns in saying that this is unacceptable, that this power plant was going on, was continuing to run in the state that it was in such a threat to us. I also have pushed that we have an evacuation plan because there is none, and Barnstable County worked with the downwinders actually and produced a great little almost satirical piece of how this is your evacuation plan, which is basically getting your pets indoors and taping up your windows. And so this, again, is a boondoggle, is a mistake by a neglect of our elected leaders. We knew that this was coming to a decommissioning period, that it was going to age out. Nothing was done until the last minute, until after it got a new certificate when it shouldn't have. People are starting to say, what is happening here? And that the fuel rods, this country in its own way, cannot wrap itself around nuclear energy and nuclear waste. We cannot deal with the waste. We cannot come up with a consensus on where to put it and how to deal with it, which is most unfortunate because that is why we cannot really have, it's the leftover mess and in the materials that are left that we can't, that makes nuclear energy even more dangerous to us. So yes, that to that, and I also would establish an advisory committee because there was an advisory committee when Joint Base, it was discovered of the degradation that the military had done to our water system. That advisory committee exists today, oversaw that, and it has been successful. It needs to be done on the decommissioning so that it doesn't fall on the taxpayers' back.
Julian.
Thank you. So I've been I've been part of the folks who've been working to hold Pilgrim Nuclear Power Station accountable. In my role, when I was Director of Policy and Regulatory Affairs for the Bureau of Environmental Health at the Department of Public Health, I was responsible for policy overseeing the radiation control program, worked extensively on the environmental monitoring program that surrounds the plant. I went toe-to-toe with Entergy on getting the utility to pay for potassium iodide pills. These are the thyroid blocking agents that are distributed to all of our communities. I even delivered them in a state-owned Prius to most of the towns here on the Cape and on the islands. So I have a really good sense of the challenges that we have with this plant, the very frustrating position that our region and the state is, because all of the activities that occur within the boundary of the nuclear power plant are under federal, not state regulation. The focus needs to be, one, on getting them to close as soon as possible, but also two, keeping our eye on the prize of decommissioning. What Entergy would love to do and will push very hard to do is to put the plant into something that's called safe store, which essentially mothballs the facility for up to 60 years. That could allow Entergy to leave a spent fuel pool full of spent fuel that's 6 stories up, operating for those 60 years with limited staff. We need to push the utility to move that fuel into dry cask storage now. We need to establish a special commission on the decommissioning and closure of Pilgrim Nuclear Power Station. This is something I've worked directly on. I've worked with Sarah Peak on this legislation, and is something that, in the face of having so few options, we need a mechanism for transparency, for public shaming. Senator Wolf has done a great job in doing this, and I feel very well prepared to continue that work, considering my experience, first-hand experience, dealing with Pilgrim.
Okay, thank you. This time we start with you, Julian. What is your awareness of human trafficking on Cape Cod and in Massachusetts in general? And what efforts are you prepared to support to improve Massachusetts state law to help victims of human trafficking and to increase penalties for trafficking?
Great question. We haven't gotten that question yet. I was very lucky to participate in an event on human trafficking on Main Street in Hyannis on the town green over Memorial Day weekend. There was advocacy around human trafficking. I think Again, this is an issue that we don't initially tend to see ourselves as a problem on Cape Cod, but as a place where so many people come, where we have so much labor, especially that comes here in the summer, there are people who are living, who are being human trafficked on the Cape, who are living in are indentured servitude, who are being impacted by this. This is part of the community. I was talking to the chief of police in Yarmouth at the event, and they have dealt with many of these situations. DA O'Keefe as well. This is something that's not just a statewide issue, it's an issue here for us, here on the Cape. And I think that's really important. I think as far as human trafficking, I am very eager in changing penalties so that we are punishing Johns and not sex workers, that we are focusing on intervening on the people who traffic in human folks. I think that we need to work towards a legal framework that understands the conditions in which someone may become exploited and need to rely on sex work, need to rely on an indentured servitude, and that we need to intervene in that. And so that's an issue that I'm increasingly becoming passionate on, that I would be committed to working with sort of the best experts in the state on this, but really, again, talking about like that this is an issue for Cape Cod, for Nantucket, for Martha's Vineyard, and seeing this as something that is happening in our communities, because it is.
As some of you may know, there is a department of the Barnstable County called Children's Cove, and that is our sexual trauma against children agency. It's a very big part of our budget. And we work very closely with that department, and they were very vocal recently about a bust of human trafficking here on the Cape just a couple of weeks ago. And what was disturbing to me now as a woman, as a full-grown, mature woman looking at this, there were comments from neighbors who actually saw things happening, and men pulling up in cabs and going in and coming out, and there was sort of a humorous curiosity, which I think we all would have as human beings. So I don't want to feel like I'm insulting someone, but the reality was that there were people being victimized in that house. And when you think of prostitution across the board, for centuries women have been human trafficked by Johns. A lot of them were abused and fearful to leave, and they really didn't even see the profit that they worked so hard and maybe in very humiliating situations. So this is a reality, and it is a reality here on Cape Cod. It is a reality across our nation and the world itself. There is such a movement of people today. There is such, from either climate or refugees fleeing unsafe conditions, there is a movement and opportunity to take advantage of those who are vulnerable. And those who are vulnerable are almost always women and children. And this has we have got to look at prostitution and sex trafficking in a different way and realize that it is here on Cape Cod and that even our own children can be victims to this. So, okay.
Okay, and next question, and this time we'll start with you, Sheila. There are environmental challenges facing the Cape. You've addressed the wastewater challenge. What other environmental challenges are there facing on the Cape, and what would you do, what actions would you take to support, initiate, address those other challenges?
Well, everything we do on Cape Cod now, whether it even is from housing to economic development, we have to look at it through the lens of coastal erosion and climate change. We are being impacted yearly and daily by the ocean. And we are surrounded, we have over 400, I think we are 500 miles of coastal boundary around Cape Cod. Within Cape Cod, we have ponds, lakes, tributaries, salt marshes that are being degraded from coastal erosion. The more that there is salt water infiltrating our aquifer, our drinking water is impacted. Housing is impacted because we cannot put houses in certain places because of wastewater in these water tables. So our coastal erosion and the climate change issue is huge, and we have got to work very hard to make ourselves resilient to that very quickly. On the Outer Cape, we lost 18 feet of coastline along Eastham and Truro in the last couple of storms. And there is only a mile left from one side to the other, from ocean to bay in Wellfleet. There are parts of Wellfleet, 10 miles wide in the Upper Cape. So this is a very serious problem for us. Last night, I did go to the celebration of a new initiative called Cape Cod Climate Change Coalition. And it really was spurred by the impact and the experience Rich Delaney of Coastal Studies had in Paris at the climate talks, of how all of these nations did come together with agreements. So all of the agencies that work to reduce carbon, from Cape Lake Compact to the APCC to the Cape Cod Commission to Coastal Studies to Woods Hole, all are working together, made a pact last night to work together to address this issue. I support their efforts. It's something very serious that we all have to take in mind.
Thank you. You know, the environment is our economy here on the Cape, and we all know this. As far as other challenges, erosion, climate preparedness, clean water, that we have a single aquifer that is very sensitive to chemicals, to spills, issues of flooding and of flood insurance, a fragile ecosystem, a fragile flora and fauna in our habitats. You know, this is personal. I think, you know, all of us can find sort of personal experience how our environment, how we're so dependent on our environment, how the reason we live here is in part because of the environment, because of that walk you can take on the beach or in the woods, and also how a changing climate is impacting our communities. For my family, the break at Boston Beach this year in Truro and the infusion of salt water into the Pamit River means that the drinking well that we use in my family may be at risk if the Pamit River becomes a sort of a Truro becomes an island, brackish, yeah. And that on climate preparedness, this is something that I have worked with at the Department of Public Health, working with sister agencies within the Environment Natural Resources agencies, around giving communities a toolkit, especially local boards of health, giving local boards of health a toolkit around how to respond to a changing climate. I think the focus around climate change here needs to be on climate resiliency and preparedness. And yes, like the new organization that Sheila just mentioned, also coming together and seeing what we can do. I also think our environment provides tremendous opportunities. For instance, far offshore wind, not Cape Wind, but far offshore wind is a huge opportunity for our region economically, is a huge opportunity to get cheap electricity, clean electricity to our region that's hungry for it. So there's both a number of challenges and threats, but also opportunities around how we can chart a sustainable future.
Okay, after all, this is a Democratic primary. So, Julian, we can just start off. The question is, have you always been a Democrat, and why do you think your experiences make you best suited for the office of state senator?
I have been a Democrat officially since I could register to vote on January 19th, what was it, like 2004, 2002, 2004. And I've been a Democrat my whole life. I'm someone who both has the tangible experience having worked in public policy at the state level, at a national level, having organized communities here in and of our communities. I understand the mechanics of the legislature, how the state budgeting process works, how the committees are structured. I have relationships with not only many of the senators, but also their aides, who are the folks that drive this work forward. I have a record of accomplishment, but I'm also someone who has grown up in and of this community. I mean, this is the reason I'm running for state senate. I'm someone who has grown up in an example of our communities that come together. I'm someone who has, has had real experience in understanding the challenges that business owners and folks in the hospitality industry face, both in the good times when you're making a lot of money on the tips and the conversation that you're having in the shoulder season about can we stay open a week or not longer, and can we support that payroll. So I'm someone who both has the experience to do the job, has a record of accomplishment in doing work both for our communities here and then more broadly, but is someone who really represents our future. And I think that there's no way, we're facing really big challenges here on the Cape and Islands. And that, I applaud sort of the smaller solutions that have been made, but we're facing a really big challenge across the region, and I think we need big solutions to get that done. And I think we need people in my generation to step up and to lead, and that's why I'm running.
I knew I was a Democrat when my father sat us down, my brother and I think I was probably around 9, he was about 13, and told us that we were Democrats and we were going to always vote Democrat, and any working man who didn't vote Democrat was out of his mind. So I remember that. I took it in, not understanding exactly what it meant, but I did understand it when I was able to register to vote. And as I said earlier, I have kept the faith ever since. I have been disappointed by the Democratic Party. I have been disappointed by many of our leaders who did not have the guts or the political will to speak truth to powers. We roll over, we acquiesce. We want to get something done, so we give in a lot. And there are times that we shouldn't, because we are the voice of the people. I believe that what I was taught, what our history books tell us, that this country was created by people, for the people, by the people. And we have been convinced that government is this other thing over here, and it's doing bad things to us. And actually, we are that government. So what we don't like is really a reflection of us. I am running for state senate, an office. I am a late-coming person to this political field. I've always worked to get good people elected. I never thought I would be elected or run for office myself, but I did get into the assembly, and here I am. My experience, I believe, is not just from my government experience. I have served Barnstable County for 10 years. I have worked with the legislature, and I have all of the things that Julian has just said. I have written policy, written legislation, gone and lobbied for that legislation, and I know how the House works. I have friends that I helped get elected 25 years ago to that House, and some of them are still there. So I feel not only politically experienced, but I have a life experience that I bring to this job, and it is a leadership job, and I feel that I have the best qualifications.
Thank you. Sheila, you get to start this question. Are you in favor of the regulation and taxation of recreational marijuana? And there will be a ballot question on that as well.
There will be a ballot question on that. And my work on homelessness and addiction has really given me a big insight on addiction here on Cape Cod. We have a alcohol problem that is really the main problem on Cape Cod. 17% of our population self-reports that they have an alcohol problem. So you can imagine it may be higher. We have about a 6% addiction to opiate problem and 3% to other substances. So we have an addiction problem, and we have to, I just forgot the question. I'm sorry.
About the regulation.
About the regulation of marijuana. So in looking at alcohol and the impact it has on health, family, work, it is a very serious drug, and we take it very lightly. And yet marijuana doesn't seem to have the same impacts of that. So initially I was very supportive. I felt that if alcohol can be regulated and sold in a reasonable way and in a state way, and there was state, you got taxes from it that you could do something for, why not do this with marijuana and take it out of the hands of the criminals? I do feel that there's going to be a problem with this. I think the opiate addiction has put a new light on marijuana. It should be called adult marijuana or an adult drug as opposed to recreational, because it gives the wrong signal to young children. And I think what we have to do is grapple with, why are we so addicted, and why do we feel we need to have painkillers and opiates or antidepressants? We've got to buck up here and take a look at ourselves. So I don't see it happening this year. I do believe that the people will speak on this, and if it does pass, I'm afraid that the legislation is going to have a hard time setting up how it's going to work.
Julian?
I support the regulation and taxation of recreational marijuana. I think as a public health person, good public health looks at the behaviors that people are doing in their life, and it works to mitigate risk. And I think there are risks with marijuana. Specifically, this ballot initiative is written, it's a pretty horrible, poorly written ballot initiative, has a whole host of things that I think the legislature is going to need to fix if it passes. But addiction is something that is a real challenge in our communities. But addiction not only with alcohol and opiates we've been talking about, gambling as a tremendous challenge. I think while we're at it, we should raise the legal age to purchase tobacco products to 21. We know that the further we can delay people from using tobacco, from using other drugs, really is critical to cognitive health. And I think just back to the prior question, which was a pretty heavy one, why am I a Democrat? I'm a Democrat because the Democratic Party is a party that cares about social justice. As a gay person, I know firsthand how people standing up for me have enabled the opportunities in my life, just like women standing up, from Seneca Falls all the way until this recent nomination have made the opportunities that Sheila has. And these are values that I'm so proud to be a Democrat because of that value to social justice, because of that understanding that we are just so much better as if we work together, that we're in it together, and especially here in a place like Cape Cod where we're all stuck out here together, whether we like it or not. Some of us more than others, depending on how far you are from the bridge or if you take a boat to get there. But that's why I'm a Democrat and why I'm proud to be a Democrat, especially never more than in this moment in the country, in our country's history.
I'm afraid we're nearing the end. I know we have a little leeway because this is Cape Media, but I'll give you a last question and then you'll sum up. And Sheila, Julian, you get this first. Will you take any action, if elected, to reform our campaign financing laws?
Yes. Being a candidate gets to mean that you get inaugurated in the fun activity of soliciting for donations. The two of us and probably so many people spend far more of their time, so much of their time as candidates, in soliciting those donations and not working on policy issues, not serving constituents. I'd really like to see the state go back to the limits that we had in place. It used to be that you could only give $500 per candidate per year. It's gone up to $1,000. I'd like to see us go back to $500. I think that keeps more controls here in Massachusetts. It reduces spending on races. Clearly, Citizens United is a federal issue. It needs to be overturned. Hopefully, President Obama, if not Clinton, will appoint a Supreme Court justice who will do that. Another thing I'm really interested in, I was talking to a colleague about an idea to have a law that would mean that candidates and politicians themselves couldn't do the asking for resources, which would be a really kind of interesting idea I'm intrigued at because it would wall off. I've actually had this experience as a state employee. I announced my candidacy while I was still a state employee, which I was very much allowed to do under all sort of ethical rules and protocols, and actually could not solicit for resources while I was an employee of the Commonwealth. And our campaign was able to fund itself, but also it really kept me focused on issues, on constituents, on challenges, on honing my message, on connecting with who I am, and far less on the nitty-gritty of something which is called call time, which is where you sit in a room and you dial for dollars. And so I think campaign finance, we can do better in Massachusetts. We have to do better at the national level. And this is something I strongly support. And I'm really interested in figuring out innovative ideas around how to work against the corrosive role of money in our politics.
Yeah, I think that Julian just said the right sentence. It is a corrosive role that money plays in politics. I think we all know that. That's part of the reason why people are kind of fed up with politics. Even Ted Kennedy, before he died, I had seen him maybe 2 years before that on a talk show, and they said, what is the difference today in Washington? And he said, it's the money. We work maybe a day a week on the people's business, and the rest of it is raising money. And this has been, it's become big business, and we're convinced now that this is the way you have to do it. You're going to run for office, so you have to raise a lot of money, and you got to get the right people hired, and you got to get the right tools that cost you thousands of dollars to do that, and then you have to have your website up, and you have to have your social media going, and all of these things you have to have going. And where is the time that you're actually talking to people, listening to what their concerns are, and what is going on in their household, and how is that impacting their entire lives? What is going on with their workplace? So it is corrosive. It makes a distance between the worker, the volunteers, and the candidate. Back in the day, you had volunteers that would all gather around tables. It was very social. You would write out envelopes for your candidate. You would make phone calls for your candidate. Now that's all done electronically. You got all these experts out there, and it really removes us from the system. And on the national level, you're so into getting that big money that you're now being forced to do pretty much make any promise for it, and you get promises back. So this is what's wrong with us in some ways, and with this political system. It should be changed. I would work very hard to change the voting laws and to roll back Citizens United, which is a joke, and is also hurting our system. And it's just not the way it should be here in America.
Thank you. We're now time to sum up, and the candidates have up to 3 minutes for a closing statement, and we start with Julian.
Thank you again to the League, to the CIDC, to those watching at home and here in the audience for the opportunity to discuss these issues. I think there's never, as we've seen tonight, there's never a dull moment in politics, and especially thank you, I think, to Brian for his service to our communities. I'm someone who's really brought to this work by the challenges that I'm seeing of people that I grew up with, whether they're folks who are aging and who are worried about if they're going to be able to live in their home through the end of their life. Friends of mine I went to high school with who want to move back, who found good jobs on the Cape but can only be here by living at home with their parents. My friend Todd, who's a contractor, who has all this work but can't find anyone he can actually hire and employ to do that work. My friend Joy McNulty of the Lobster Pot, who opened her business a whole month late because they couldn't get their H-2B and J-1 visa workers that are part of the 97 people who work in their restaurant. I really see this. I see this knocking on doors. People who really care about this place, but are really anxious about its future. And I think it's clear that the status quo is not working for people here on Cape Cod, here on Martha's Vineyard, here on Nantucket, and that we face really big challenges. And that I'd really encourage us to think beyond, I think, some of the small solutions that we hear on Beacon Hill and that we hear in and of our communities. And I'm going to work as hard as I can and go wherever I can to advance the needs of our communities, to tell our stories, to fight for families like mine, so that families like mine can have a future here, and that we can look towards a future that addresses mobility for our seniors, that has affordable rental housing for both folks of my generation and for the 2 generations ahead that raised my parents, that we can look towards a sustainable future. And I really fear that if we all don't get involved in the future of this place, I'm not sure how many of us will be able to be here, or at least our subsequent generations will be here. And so that's why I'm running for state senate. I want to make sure that families like mine have a future here on Cape Cod. I'm very humbled and honored by this experience, the privileges that I've had in my life to take experience working in and of the legislature, in and of state politics, policy regulations, but also in and of the fabric of our community, and really feel that I bring something to this work, and I'd be truly honored to be your Democratic nominee. I have been working my butt off, and I'm going to keep working as hard as I can to knock doors, to make calls, to connect with as many folks, and to build an organization here so that we not only prevail in November, but also we can chart a sustainable future for our communities. Thank you.
Sheila, you get the line.
So 6 years ago, I actually ran for this office. That was after I had been elected to the Assembly of Delegates and served 2 years, and I had just been elected 2 years prior as county commissioner. And that was when I jumped in, and then another candidate jumped in by the name of Dan Wolf. But at that time, people said to me, "You need more experience," and they were right. They were right. I did need more experience. To go into the House, and even though I was very familiar with the workings of the House through friends and colleagues in my own endeavors that I had to pursue there as a social worker and as an advocate for families, it's a different experience once you're elected, and it's a very different learning tool. So I have worked very hard here on Cape Cod. I've learned what our issues are, and I have worked hard on them from the policy level to the legislative level to lobbying our governor. I've been in the governor's office from the legislature all the way through. And I have always fought for the underdog. I like people. I believe in us. I think that we can be better than we are, and we can treat each other better than what we're doing. And I'm very passionate about our country and our state, and I love Cape Cod. So I bring to this a life of experience as a social worker, as a mother, as a woman, and understand what it's like to struggle through many, many challenges. And I've had a lot of humility imposed on me, and some of that has been self-inflicted lessons that I've had to learn very hard. But you have been gracious enough to elect me 3 times on the ballot. And as I say, I've kept that, your honor, I have honored you, and try to live up to your faith in me. And I will continue to do that at the State House. This is the leadership position of the delegation. It is the role, it is the seat that starts to really look and be the adult seat of the House. And I feel that I'm finally gotten to the age where I can call myself an adult, and a mature adult, with wisdom and experience, and to work on your behalf. I have raised my child. I have dedicated myself to this type of work in one form or another, and I will continue to work for you and for all individuals on Cape Cod, whether they be very tiny or very large, and no matter what party you are from, because we're all in this together, and we've got to survive together, and I would be honored to have your faith and vote again.
Thank you both very, very much, and I think we can give them a round of applause. I want to thank the audience for your questions. There were many more I could have asked, but you will have another opportunity because they are going to meet each other again on August 24th at Yarmouth Town Hall. Remember, this debate will be broadcast on channels 98 and 99. Check your schedule for the times. And mark your calendars not only for August 24th, but also for September 9th, so that you will be sure to vote in the primary. And thank you to the league members for assisting, and thanks to Cape Media for hosting this debate. And thank you. What?
The primary is September 8th.
What did I say?
Thursday, September 8th.
September 8th.
It's a Thursday.
I had it.
Thursday
It's gonna be
after
a
Labor Day.
Thursday.
I had the 8th, and somebody said, no, that's the 9th. So, yes,
Oh, God.
thank
It is a
you.
Thursday, the 8th.
September 8th. I take
It's
that
on
back.
a Thursday, not a Tuesday.
Anyway, thanks to the Cape Media for hosting this debate. And most of all, thank you, Julian Cyr and Sheila Lyons, for putting themselves out, taking the time, the energy, the effort to vie for this seat. Thank you.
Thank you.